Hydropower is absolutely a necessity. If we don't have it, we will fail. We rely on not just transportation, we rely on, say, the lower Snake River dams for energy. We utilize energy for our irrigation. We utilize energy for heating our homes, our rural communities. If we were to see our energy costs rise, that would be another target towards rural communities. Our rural communities are struggling.
Welcome back to DAM, the official podcast of Northwest Hydropower. I'm your host, Austin Rohr. 2025 has arrived, and it's so great to be back in the DAM HQ studio here at Northwest River Partners, talking with you all. I hope you had a great holiday season and your new year is starting off on the right foot. As of this month, we'll also be officially celebrating 2 years of the podcast. And this third year is set to be another great one. As mentioned before our holiday hiatus, there have been some changes on my end, but in many ways, DAM will remain much the same. I encourage you all to stick around to the end of this episode for more information on that. In the meantime, I hope you'll take a moment here at the top to make sure you're subscribed and have turned on notifications so you don't miss out when we upload new episodes. And be sure to share your favorite podcast with friends and family. We'd love to see our audience grow in 2025, and we need your help to make that happen. Now, as for today's episode, we've got a very special topic lined up. You've heard about agriculture over the years in many forms, but primarily from transportation perspectives. Today we're going to dive into the world of farming, and more specifically, wheat farming. So, whether you adhere to a gluten-free diet or not, I hope you'll enjoy hearing from our guest today, who is both a farmer herself, as well as the executive director for the Washington Association of Wheat Growers, Michelle Hennings. Michelle, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Hi, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting opportunity. And I know, we've covered the transportation conversation a fair bit now on the podcast, but we haven't actually really dove into agriculture, gotten into some of the farming that takes place and had those conversations. So I'm super excited to share that perspective with our listeners today.
I am too. I love telling our story, and I think it's very informational for those who don't necessarily know a lot about farming on, what's happening within our state for wheat growers. So.
Absolutely. And I feel like the perfect place to kick off that story, as we so often do, is to really just jump in and talk first and foremost about who the organization is. So give us some background on who the Washington Association of Wheat Growers is.
The Washington Association of Wheat Growers, they were established to dedicate enrichment of the Washington wheat industry, and they were established in 1954. We're a nonprofit member organization that depends on volunteers for support. We currently have approximately 2,000 members. WAG is actively engaged in local, state, and national level advocating and educating on behalf of our growers. So we're the lobbying organization per se. We also do various efforts for educating our growers. We have, educational sessions. We represent them at the state and national level. I have been working with the association for 19 years. I started out as the director of finance for 9 years. And then I become executive director, and it's going on 10. So I'm almost going to be there 20 years, which is crazy to think about. I came from a family farm myself. So we grow wheat, hay, and we have cattle. So I feel my job as executive director, it comes easy to me because this is the life I live, and I really enjoy it. Our membership is comprised mainly of family farms within 13 counties of Eastern Washington. We have a few association members, and those are the members that are industry companies that support family farming, such as the McGregor Company and Ag West. We also have a Wheat Life magazine that is also supported in the industry through advertising.
And as far as that background goes, I know you talked about being naturally a fit for this because of your own family, your own farming background. But I'd love to just kind of hear more about, what is that farming experience like? What was the upbringing like? And, how you developed this passion for the wheat growers there over in Eastern Washington.
Well, I was born and raised on a farm, so ever since I was little, I have lived the farming life, which is a way of life. I I really like to express that because farming is not just a business, it is a way of life, and it's hard work and dedication. So I grew up on a farm, then I went off to college and I ended up marrying a farmer rancher, just like my father was in my family. So I've lived it my whole life. It's a passion. We feed the world, that's really a good feeling when you know that you're doing something tremendously exceptional as a way of life for feeding people.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an amazing thing. And it's something obviously we're going to dive into as we get further into the podcast and talking about, where these crops end up and the real value that they provide to people across not only the Northwest, but across the world. But as far as talking about the association, you mentioned that you've got farmers throughout Eastern Washington, throughout those 13 counties. And I'd just love to know kind of what those members look like. I mean, who are the farmers that make up the association?
We have everything from very small, the majority of them, 93, 94% are family farms. So it can range anywhere from a small farmer to a larger farmer. We're seeing farms that have been through times of trends basically get a little bigger because, for instance, a farm could have a generation that's not going to be taking over their farm, so they'll end up leasing land to their neighbor. So we mainly have not small family farms, but family farms. And I think that's a misconception we hear sometimes is that farms are these big corporations, but they're family farms. So for me, for instance, I'm one of the small farmers they talk about when we're going through a trend right now that costs are high and prices are low. So, we're losing a lot of those small family farms due to the atmosphere we're in for costs versus what we're gaining for price.
And I was going to ask you too, when it comes to those farms, as you mentioned, they're not these big conglomerate corporations that are running everything. There are a lot of families, a lot of small farms. Is there a lot of coordination between those folks? Do they work together really well and try and support each other as opposed to maybe what people might imagine as competition?
No, they definitely work together. We live in rural communities. We come together, we support those rural communities. For instance, my board is made up of the 13 counties. They have a representative, they have their own individual wheat grower organization. They get together, they have meetings. Then they come to our board meeting and discuss, what's happening within their county together. We have meetings every month, so yes, they do. They really band together and they support their communities and families. If something happens on a farm, per se, there's a death in the family and it's during harvest time, they get together, all of them, and go harvest the crop for that neighbor. It's a wonderful atmosphere to live in, the unity that they do have. And when needed, and right now there's a lot of need for advocacy, they step up to the plate. And it's always something that Washington Association of Wheat Growers, that farmers need to tell their stories. People want to hear it from the farmer. We do farm tours. They offer up their farms for people to come out and see what their way of life is. And so that is a positive, definitely a positive for the farming community.
Now, as you touched on, there are challenges. The farms, as you mentioned, there's been a lot of farms that are shrinking, going away, and it's a way of life that as you said, requires some advocacy. When we're looking at the challenges that wheat growers are facing in the Northwest in 2024, what are some of those challenges?
Our biggest challenges are high input costs versus the low market price we receive for our wheat. Because we are price takers and we cannot pass on our costs onto customers. The current price is roughly $5.20, and our break even is around $7.50 to $8, and that's depending on input pricing and inflation. Our input costs include fuel, supplies, repairs and maintenance, transportation, bank interest rates. Another big challenge is regulation from the state and national level. We also rely on Mother Nature, which we have no control over. So from year to year, our crop production can be at a high with a great crop or a low due to drought and quality issues, which we've had experienced in the last few years. Washington State is very volatile when it comes to weather patterns, and each county can have very different situation when it comes to their crops. This last year, Whitman County, for instance, had an abundant crop this year, but it could go a couple counties over, for instance, and I'm in Adams County, and we were hit with frost damage. So our yield was a little bit below average. I think another big challenge for us is the younger generation farmers. So when we're going through these trends of pretty much the farmer isn't making money, right? And that's a big problem. The younger generation looks at that, even though they would like to take on the family farm, but they can see some of the struggles that happen with the, not making any money in their new families. So they end up going to college and getting a job that they're going to be able to support their family with. And so to have younger generation take on those family farms, I feel is a huge challenge for us. And it's recognized because there are some national level programs to try to help new beginning farmers, but still it's a tough go to start farming.
Now, one thing you mentioned there is I believe it was like $5.25 and $8. Is that what does that refer to exactly?
So when we sell our crop, we sell it for a price, and it's a market price that is global. And so we have basically, okay, for instance, my farm, we harvest the wheat and then it goes into the elevator and we sort at the elevator and watch the price. And so what happens is okay, the price is say is $5. Well, that's not even going to meet my costs to be able to pay my bank loan. So I will sit there and wait as long as I can to see if the price will go up. And we always, take information from the elevators on markets, on how they feel the markets are they going to increase or are they going to decline? Because we don't want to get 480, right, for a price. So basically we sell the wheat at 520. Then you have some of the costs come out. You have transportation costs to get our wheat over to the ports to be able to ship overseas. So 90% of our wheat's exported along with Oregon wheat, 50% is Idaho. We are an export market. We heavily rely on foreign buyers to buy our wheat. We have a specialty niche wheat called soft white wheat that they like to buy for their cookies, crackers, pastries, pretzels, flatbreads. And so we have this, and so it's very important that we're able to get our wheat over to the ports on time with reliability to get to our customers on time. And so when we're talking about price, also our price is right now considered inflated. We have inflationary. Well, other countries don't have that value of the dollar. And so what happens is when customers are trying to buy our wheat, they think we're expensive. And when we come down to that situation, we potentially have a situation where our competitors could take some of our market share. So at $5.20, they feel our wheat's expensive. But on the other hand, when we have all the costs we do, domestically, that's not enough for the farmer to break even.
And as far as the sensitivity to those costs go, obviously we're talking numbers, we're talking these kind of different dollar amounts, but just in terms of, the changes in price, the different inflationary pressures, how much of a margin do we have to work with on some of these things before it really pushes those farmers over the edge?
I feel we're in that situation. So I do have some great numbers. For instance, fertilizer is up 57% than it was in 2018. The operating interest is at 205%. So back in 2021, 22, we had a $7 price. Our price was fluctuating a little bit better. And all of a sudden we take a drop to 520, but we have all these inflationary costs that are occurring. So actually we are in a tough situation. Recently, we went over to DC to advocate with the other commodities such as corn, soy, sorghum, all the commodities over there, got to cotton. We got together and went to the Hill and said, this is what's happening out in our economies, and this is what is happening out in farm country. And at the end of the year, they did pass two bills to help us with our economic assistance and also for quality issues, disaster aid. So that will be helpful, but there's still the situation that our value of our commodities are going down, and that is really hurting farmers. There was a Seattle Times article that, came out, and it basically said, all the farms basically between 2017 and 2022, there were 14 farms and ranches lost a week every week for 5 years running. That's 3,717 operations. That's happening weekly. And so we know that this is still occurring because they're just not being able to pay the bills.
And is that something, when you talk about the weekly occurrences, the number of farms being lost, we see those statistics, but is that something that you're seeing also within the association and you're hearing some of those stories directly from your members as well?
Hearing, I haven't heard of any of our members that are, going out of business or anything like that. I've heard of other commodities that have been selling out. It just depends from farm to farm, whether, what they've had for capital, prior, or, are they working from year to year on whether they can, basically make this work through this trend we're going through. We do go through trends. It seems if you look at the historical data that, we've had price drops before. I think it was 1980s. We lost a lot of farms during that time. And so there is trends, but it all depends on, we have no control over that, which is that I think that's the biggest frustrating factor is we don't have control over our price that we receive or the costs that we, are incurred, but you have to do certain processes, take care of your wheat so that you have an abundance of bushels when you harvest. So you have to spray, you have to, put money into your equipment. You have to have that equipment running. If you don't, then you're not going to be able to get your commodity to market.
You mentioned that you'd gone back to DC and gotten together with a lot of the other, I guess, crops that are out there, the folks that represent some of these other industries within ag. Is there typically a lot of collaboration between, say, wheat and corn and the other ag producers, or is that something that really takes a larger, broader, existential threat of this nature to bring everyone to the same table?
So we are members of the National Association of Wheat Growers, and there's like the, National Corn Growers. There's, they all each have a national group. I know that those groups have barely worked together very well. I feel in the 19 years that I've been working, I feel we definitely are more so working together because we really have figured out, not just figured out, but realized that one big voice gets us a lot further than individually. We can't do it on our own. When you're talking, you make an impact when you have everyone saying, this is what's happening. We need help, out in the country. So I feel collaboration efforts, which is my favorite thing, is collaborating. I think that they have really escalated and is needed, because I think that finally, not finally, but we are seeing that, we're in a situation where we need to be at the table, tell our story, and make sure that they know how some of these, legislation or bills can impact the farmer, either negatively or positively. So we really work on that, and we work with others as well.
And on the note of collaboration, I think that leads us perfectly into this next topic, which is what brings us here today, brings us to this conversation. And that is the importance of hydropower to the wheat growers and to the association. And I'd love to just hear, directly from you what hydropower in the Northwest means to wheat growers and why there is such an important relationship between this energy generating resource and wheat farms across the Northwest.
Hydropower is absolutely a necessity for us. If we don't have it, we will fail. So that is my first statement. We rely on not just transportation, we rely on, say, the lower Snake River dams for energy. We utilize energy for our irrigation. We utilize energy for heating our homes, our rural communities. If we were to see our energy costs rise, that would be another target towards rural communities. Our rural communities right now are struggling. So if this happens with farmers, if the lower Snake River dams were to come out, their transportation costs were to double, the rural communities rely on farmers to support their businesses, right? So that's very important, the energy side of it. We need low cost energy for everybody. Another, how we rely on the dams in the system, hydro, is irrigation. We have irrigated crops that weren't there. So we would definitely lose the production in that area, and it would affect economies terribly. Our number one is transportation, on how we get our wheat to market. This is a clean, reliable source of transportation for us, and efficient, to get our wheat to our markets on time. Reliability for us is absolutely number one. If we're not reliable to our customers, they will go somewhere else. We have competitors such as Australia that will gladly take our wheat. And we don't want to see that, because, as you can see, as I talked before, our costs are already high, and to add on another cost and become unreliable to our customers, which 90% of our wheat is going to, we will lose farms rapidly. So it is absolutely essential that we keep our system in place. And, other countries look at our system, and we have a world-class system, and they want it themselves. And for us to be talking about removing such a vital part of what we do in the economies that they support, it would be just devastating.
I'm also curious, and I, fully recognize this may not be the case, but have you ever heard anything about what some of those folks on the other side of that market might think about the topic? I mean, has there ever been like any conversations or any feedback about even just the idea of dismantling that system?
Personally, I have not heard from them. I have heard that, what are they thinking? And I'm sure it's a concern for them, because if we have ships come over and we can't have our wheat there, it's hundreds and thousands of dollars a day for them to sit, or they'll turn around and leave. They'll go buy it somewhere else. So the thing is it is a competitive market. So if they start seeing major concerns or changes in how we are, trying to get our wheat to them, and we're not being efficient and reliable for them, they'll just buy from somewhere else.
And when you say our wheat, I mean, we're not just talking about wheat in the Northwest, correct?
We are the #1 export gateway for wheat, transporting approximately 60% of all U.S. wheat to markets overseas. Nearly 10% of all of our U.S. wheat exports move by barge just on the Snake River. So we also have corn and soy coming through our system. And then you also have the case of the Mississippi. You know, they experience drought quite often. It's a big concern for them. And there's been articles about them talking about potentially having to rail over to us to get their product out on time, depending, you know, so we're there for each other. And so that's where you get into some of the coalition work I've been doing is uniting the river systems so that we speak as one and support each other, because this is a working river system as well. And it is absolutely vital to farm economies, not just farmers, I mean, everybody. And I think that when they talk about removal, I don't necessarily think they realize what the impacts would actually be. And that's one of my biggest concerns is, yeah, it's okay to have the concept of if we remove the lower Snake River dams, the salmon will, you know, thrive and get better, but there's no scientific data that can prove that. And so what about if we did that and then they didn't improve and you just completely wiped out a whole economy that was, you know, functioning at a level that, you know, we need to be. So.
And I know we've talked so much about numbers, we've talked about costs, we've talked about the quantity of the wheat that's going out into that market. But when we're talking about just, you know, the value, and I'm not even sure, you know, given the conversation we've had and talking about the farms, the farmers, the families, I'm not even sure that there really is a number that can quantify it. But what kind of value are we talking about when we're talking about these grain exports?
So in 23-24, we had 20.8 million metric tons of grain that was shipped out of the Pacific Northwest. And for those who don't know, 1 metric ton is 39.368 bushels. And there is 60 pounds in 1 bushel of wheat. For Washington alone, we grow enough wheat to fill the Seahawks Stadium to the rim every year. So that's pretty big. That's a lot of wheat, right? And that's just Washington. So think of everything else that's coming through from Montana, Oregon, Idaho. We have 11 other states that come through with wheat exports. You know, a value of over 20 billion that includes food and egg products, soybeans, wheat, and corn and processed exports are going through our system. That's massive. And so to even jeopardize that is just something that I can't even fathom, because it's so big. And you know, we are going through currently in Washington State a transportation study for them to look at, okay, if we remove the dams, how can we rework our system to basically replace it? And I've been sitting on the committees and talking with them, and there's questions they can't answer. They can't guarantee reliability for us. We rely on rail, truck, and river. We need all three. 60% is by river, 30% is by rail, and the other is trucking. Trucking is very small. It's probably more 38% for rail. But there's reliability factors in all three of them. You know, trucking, we have labor issues. Rail, it's timing. They may be late getting our products sometimes. And then, you know, we have the river, which can, you know, take an abundant amount of our wheat at once and keep trucks off the road. So, and for them to redo our system with rail and trucking would be a massive undertaking. But also, you know, there's permitting for basically, you know, redoing our system. So it's amazing to me that it's even being considered. I think that it's a mistake. I hope that this just gets shelved, because we can't lose our system at all. We can't lose the river and the economies that when you go to Port of Lewiston, that whole port will be gone. I mean, they're ground zero. So we work heavily with, Port of Lewiston when we advocate on behalf of the river system because they have a great story to tell down.
And I think something that you speak to here that is really worth pointing out as well is when we talk about the impacts of dam breaching and the potential impacts, so often we are looking at it from the perspective of these studies. We're trying to understand the numbers, the values, the sort of costs that would have to be sunken in order to, as you said, essentially redo the system. But I think that there's this other element that you've hit on really well and covered a lot of already is that some of this is almost unquantifiable. You can't put it into, you can't just easily put that into a study and explain, for instance, the reliability challenges or some of the impacts that would happen as a result of even trying to change the way the system works and in the process upset this very delicate balance, frankly, that allows this economy and this market to function the way that it does.
Yes, we call the river system N84 for a reason. It is an interstate waterway. And so everything that's moving on that river is important. We're not going to just go and take I-90 out. We're not going to take a system out and say, okay, we're going to try to reroute this. It just, I've said this before, it doesn't make sense to me. I think that, the impacts that would occur, people are really not aware of what this will actually do to everyone, all the stakeholders. And that brings me to, I have been very proud of all the stakeholders that have come together and worked, to advocate for our system. We've bonded together, we've gone national, we've really coalesced together to make sure that we are telling the story of our system, including Northwest River Partners. We've been to DC with them. So it's something that we have to keep ahead of. We need to play offense. We go to Congress on the committees that have the say on dam removal and talk to them, educate them. They understand the value of our system. And that's very important because Congress is the one that can actually make the decision to remove the dams. So that is a primary focus for us.
And speaking to that coalition that's being built as well, could you speak a little bit to the partnership that's been developed over the past few years with obviously strengthening ties between not only other farmers, other groups out there, but as you mentioned, organizations like our own, but also others in the energy and public power space in particular?
Yes, so when the dam rhetoric really started moving forward and we started seeing these commitments coming down, and this was prior, we started really working together, with the Pacific Northwest Waterways, Port of Lewiston, Columbia River Pilots, Tidewater, Shaver, American Cruise Lines, Northwest River Partners. And we started banding together and saying, we need to work together. We need to get out there. We need to speak. I myself has been speaking to business people. I went over to talk to, a group for I-5. I asked how many of them, there was 200 people in the room. I asked how many of them had actually been to a wheat farm or, know a farmer. And I had like 3 or 4 people raise their hand. So for me, I was like, I'm in the right place. And so, and then we, are with port associations. I've been in college classrooms. I've been featured on Fox and Friends last year, which I was really nervous, but I can do this way easier. But, it's just getting out and working together. And so last year, I had this vision that we really need to pull together nationally. This is a regional issue, but it is national because it'll affect everyone nationally as well. And Congress is, they're national. So I got together with the Upper Mississippi Waterways. And so we got together, we went on a tour, we had a meeting with them, asking them to basically work together. And they agreed. And so we are speaking on behalf of each other when, we hear anything in congressional offices on questions, supporting each other for infrastructure. It really is a very neat, I guess is the word, or satisfying thing to know that we can pull together and work together on these issues. And we will be seeing issues in the future. This isn't, of course, you see the change in administration. I've had comments like, well, we're good, right? No, we're not. We cannot stop what we're doing. We need to basically we need to be playing offense, keeping it going hard, because we will see this come around. Since I've worked at the wheat growers for 19 years, this has been, a trend that kind of does a circle, okay, it's quiet, then all of a sudden it picks up again, it's quiet. It's going to be an ongoing battle for us, but it's something we really need to defend. There isn't data against it, show me the science that this would work. They can't do that. And I think that's a struggle for the other side. And I don't like to say the other side because, we want to come to the table with everybody and find solutions so that not one stakeholder is, negatively impacted. There are a lot of different things we can do to help with salmon recovery and utilize the funding that's being done with all these different studies. We've seen 4 or 5 studies come out, which is costing millions of dollars. Use that funding for programs that can actually, make a difference. There's so many things that could be done along the river systems for improvements. So we would definitely want to work together with, everyone to be able to do that.
Well, we are certainly in alignment on that one, and I think that's one of the great things, obviously, about the continued partnership that we've had, and I appreciate the perspective there, and helping our audience kind of understand why it is so important that we all work together, and that we've really tried to foster and build these relationships as organizations representing all sorts of different interests that ultimately have some tie back to the river in one way or another. When we look at where we're at here in 2025, when we look at what's ahead, I'm just curious, what challenges, obviously aside from continuing to confront the dam breaching challenges, but what other challenges are we looking at, either short term or long term in the wheat space in particular?
There's a lot of challenges for wheat. As I talked, it's just challenges looking forward is going to be, it is our transportation system. That's at the top of mind for me. Also, our price of wheat versus our input costs. Also, I like to look forward, and when you look at Congress or the state legislature, all the changes that can happen there. So you really have to, it's like an ongoing process of educating the public. I did an interview, I mentioned Fox and Friends, and I went on and I talked about wheat and barging and transportation. And I went to look at the comments online, and I see, what is this lady talking about? They don't transport anything on the river system, or why is she just talking about barging? They truck it. So I feel like people who don't live around the river system necessarily actually understand what it all entails. And so it's always messaging, it's always PR for us, I feel, of being able to educate where people's food comes from, and how, when you talk about the river system, on how it's utilized and how it's benefiting them, how it's hitting their bottom line. When you talk about energy, you can talk about costs of electricity prices for them, their utility bills. But when you talk about wheat and we export it, how do you come down to that bottom line of how exactly does it affect that consumer? So it's something that really for us is a challenge, and we're always, trying to look at strategy forward and how to tell our message and make sure that we are consistently and doing more to educate. Like being on your show today. That's an important thing. It's important that, we get out in front of people and tell our message. Farmers have not always been good about that, but I feel as we have moved through years of uncertainty that I'm seeing more of them being willing to do that. And that is a positive for us. So it's definitely agriculture needs to tell their story when it comes to what's happening and how it's affecting them.
I'm really glad that you're here today to tell that story on the podcast, and I hope that a lot of our listeners take some interest and want to continue to learn more. And that really leads me to what I wanted to ask you next, which is for someone who wants to support what Washington Wheat is doing, they want to learn more about wheat farming and just the agriculture stories as a whole. How can someone do that? Where can they go to find out more and really get involved and take some action on behalf of the work that you're doing?
Well, we do have a website. We have social media. They can call our office. We actually have programs where you can meet a farmer. You can go out and basically see their farming operations. We do a lot of tours. We've done Lower Snake River Dam tours. We've done farming tours. The Lower Snake River Dam tour that Washington Wheat puts on, we would go through Palouse country and we can see, harvesting and be able to experience that. All you have to do is pretty much Google it online and then find the contacts. We are out there. We try to get out, social media, go to our Facebook, like our Facebook. We have Instagram, we have LinkedIn. So we are doing those social media platforms. So we have a lot of information and we definitely are there to educate the public. So please contact me. I would be more than happy to get you what you need and where you would like to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely make sure to drive people that direction here when we publish the podcast, and super excited. Hopefully we can get some hydropower listeners into the wheat space and into agriculture as well. As we kind of wind down here, one thing I just wanted to ask as well, is there anything you really want our audience to know that we didn't cover today, or perhaps some top line messages you just want to make sure people really take home at the end of today's episode?
One of my big messages is please do your research before you make a decision on it. And this is a lot about transportation in the Lower Snake River dams. Do your research. Go talk to a farmer that's directly involved. Talk to the local economies that are going to be affected, or do your research on how that will affect them before you make that decision to go one way or the other. It's really important that, instead of being emotional about it, to actually have the scientific data behind it on how it'll actually affect our system. That's something I always love to tell people, because I just sometimes it's a gut reaction to, be emotional about it and say, oh yeah, let's remove those dams. It'll save all the salmon. But in reality, there's information behind it that people really should really research on both sides. Don't just, take one side. Make sure you research both and then come to your conclusion. Also, one thing I did want to bring up that I didn't mention earlier is that we do provide food aid for other countries. And that's something I wanted to plug, because that's something we is very proud of. And we need our system to be able to accomplish that as well. And knowing that we feed other countries that need it is vital for us. So that's something that I did want to bring up later. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's really fantastic, and yeah, I think that's something that people probably don't have any awareness of currently. So I'm really glad you brought that to not only, my attention, but to everyone's attention who's listening today. And that does kind of bring us down to the end of the podcast here, which I don't know, have you been able to listen to any prior episodes of Dan before coming on
I
today?
have, and you do a great job. I really enjoy them. Thank you. And
Well,
when you
thank
asked
you.
me to be on, I was like, yes, that sounds great. And I'm really glad that you are able to do these, and I find them very beneficial and I share them. And so it's definitely a good education piece to our public.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. And yeah, that, ultimately that is the goal of what we're trying to do. So I'm really glad that we're able to continue that and shine a light on this new story here today that I think we deserve, our listeners deserve to hear quite a bit more about. That also means though that you probably know what's coming next, which is kind of our final question at the end of every episode. And that's just to get back to talking about our guests, getting to know you a little bit better, and really helping our listeners get to know the kind of people that are behind the work we do. And the way we do that is to give you the floor to talk about something that matters to you in your personal life. And really, what I do is I ask everyone just to give us kind of a little slice of life advice, essentially. So it can be anything that's important to you and how you lead your daily life, or it can be something that maybe you saw recently and felt particularly inspired by. So yeah, without further ado, the floor is yours, and we'd love to hear the things that are important and matter to you.
Well, I want to give a kudos to all the super moms out there because I work a very full-time job and I have two amazing kids and I run like crazy 100 miles an hour, but I wouldn't give up a minute of it. And so, just make sure I think one of the things that is very important is when you have the schedule like I do, is to make sure you take time for your family. But on the other hand, I also am very passionate about my work. And so it's just something that sometimes I feel like I'm super mom instead of super woman. And so it's something though that I love. And so I just enjoy what you do, enjoy what you advocate for, because you can be very passionate. I'm a very passionate person when it comes to working for the farmers. I enjoy every minute of it and I believe in them as I am one as well. And what they do is very important to life. So we need our food. We need safe, reliable food from us growing it. We're not, purchasing food from another country trying to rely on that. We are self-sufficient in the United States. And that is amazing and something that is definitely we need to fight for.
Yeah, and I think, given the conversation we had today, the folks who are actually growing that food and making that possible are so many families, so many, real people out there in the world. And again, not those corporations that people might think of. And so yeah, I think it's super important to stand up for those folks and also to be thankful for what you have as well and recognize that we're all in this together. So yeah, I really appreciate the piece of advice there and really appreciate you making the time to come on today's podcast. It's like I said, it's a super interesting topic. It's a really important topic and we all love our food. We love being able to have access to the different crops that we have here and I think as many people have felt over the past few years, it's also it's something that nobody wants to see when the prices on those things increase dramatically. And I think like eggs right now are the big one. I paid like $9 the other day for eggs. So
Yes,
it's something that
you
definitely,
see that at the grocery level,
yeah,
you see your food prices go up and that's really tough. It's tough times for people. And so, there's no reason food needs to cost that, but hopefully there's always hope. And so that's something, there's always the other side and we just need to get through the tough times and get to the good times. So.
absolutely, absolutely. So, like I said, we'll make sure to give people the resources they need to find out more about Washington wheat and to access some of those places that you mentioned there earlier on. And again, thanks for making the time. It's really great to have you on, and I'm so glad you were excited to come on. And hopefully, we did at least a decent job. I know we're not Fox and Friends, but Dam is on the come up, so we'll be there in no time, right?
Yes, you will. You're doing great. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you do in your organization. So thank you.
We at River Partners are so grateful for the continued partnership with the Washington Association of Wheat Growers and the expertise from Michelle on this important topic. Food prices and food security are something we're all paying closer attention to these days, and ensuring our farmers can succeed and thrive benefits us all. As you heard, hydropower is a critical resource here in the Northwest to making that possible. For those of you listening, thanks for sticking around to the end of this episode. And as you'll recall, I hinted at some podcast changes at the top of this one. So let's dive into that now. The Dam podcast has adhered to a strict bi-weekly schedule from the very first episode, with the exception of our holiday breaks. However, as I've been promoted to the Deputy Executive Director position here at the organization, my own schedule is a bit busier. Likewise, securing guests and preparing episodes is always a heavy lift. As host, I feel that the priority should be the quality of episodes we put together, and that rushing to try to put together an episode for every other Friday specifically makes that a lot harder to maintain. So here's what I want to know from you. Would you like to see us continue to release new episodes every other Friday? Or would you prefer that we release episodes as soon as they're ready to publish, like we're doing in this case? The latter option would mean that you may receive new episodes faster and in shorter succession at times, with periodic waits that may extend beyond 2 weeks as well. I'd love to know what you think, and in the meantime, I'll continue to work on my end to ensure that we put together the best podcast in Northwest Hydropower for you all to enjoy. But please know that we will be trying this out for a little bit, and so your feedback is very appreciated. The easiest way to provide that input is to contact us through nwriverpartners.org and use our contact form. Alternatively, you can send emails to info@nwriverpartners.org or shoot us messages through social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn at nwriverpartners. I think that's just about everything for this one, and thanks again for your continued support of DAM. I'll look forward to hearing from you all shortly, and until the next one, see ya.